Selectmen meeting for February 24th. The board just came out of an executive session where we met with town council to discuss a case of Vidia Bank versus the Zoning Board of Appeals. And on tonight's open session agenda, we're going to have a presentation from RCN, public participation. We're going to be meeting with town council to discuss the open meeting law and public records complaints. Then we were talking about authorization for Mass Works grant for River Path Associates. We'll have the town manager's report. And then we'll have public hearings. First public hearing will be consideration new officer and director for Bazaar West at 855 Worcester Road. We have been asked to allow the requested transfer by the Sanford Restaurant Group to be withdrawn. And the third hearing tonight is consideration of common victuals license and change location for Dunkin' Donuts at 430 Franklin Street, which is continued from last week's meeting. We're going to have a joint meeting with the planning board and hear a presentation from the MAPC regarding downtown development and central business district zoning proposals. We'll then review the preliminary warrant articles list for town meeting and consider which articles the Board of Selectmen will sponsor. We'll then discuss approving meeting minutes, and we'll then have selectmen reports. So the first item on the agenda is a presentation by RCN. There he is. Welcome.
Did you want to say anything, or?
Well, no, only to introduce Rodrigo, our director at the government channel, and his guest from RCM, I think it's Tom Steele.
Yes, that my boss.
And the other gentleman,
Jeff Carlson.
Jeff Carlson. And with a lot of collaboration between the government channel and RCN, we've seen some opportunities arise that Ron will discuss, and I think we're here to kind of announce some improvements and to thank RCN for the role they played in making this available.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you very much. I always appreciate the opportunity to come out from behind the cameras and address the board. We have some very exciting news tonight, which is the culmination of many years of planning, execution, and partnership with RCN here. As you know, the government channel is a town of Framingham service that is dedicated, and their mission is to make local government more accessible to the public. And we do that by coverage of municipal meetings that far exceed what's available in our surrounding communities. Currently, we're managing ongoing commitments to Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Town Meeting, Zoning Board of Appeals, Disability Commission, and numerous other community events. And what that means is that every major project or initiative that comes before a body for action is broadcast live and also made available to the public at their fingertips. What we have been lacking is really a modern and robust transmission system that can deliver to our Framingham subscribers the image quality and sound quality in which the programming is created. So we're here tonight to announce that RCN is the first cable company to provide our service in high definition. Channel 613 addresses many years of challenges with the analog technology that exists in today's modern telecommunications world. You and me, Mr. Chairman, have really spent quite a number of years waiting to see this day come to pass. And I would say that our success is not only measured in the quality of our programming, but also in the strength of our relationship with our cable franchisees. And I can tell you, knowing Tom for many years, we have no better ally. Not only has he made the HD channel a reality, but he's also provided solutions at no cost that benefit all viewers. Our legacy systems. So with that, I'd just like to thank, in particular, Danny Harso, who helped make sure our broadcast standards were compatible, Rich Prindeville, who assisted with implementation and testing, and, of course, Tom Steele, who really made the whole project possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Scott, do you want to speak, one of you gentlemen?
I can't really add much to that. I'm Jeff Carlson, the Vice President and General Manager for RCN here locally. And I thank you for having us before the Board of Selectmen to what is essentially the official launch of the HD government channel here in Framingham. So I, as well as Tom, value the relationship here We want to bring the best network products and in video and data and phone to your constituents, and we strive to keep ahead of the curve in terms of our network upgrades and so forth. So, again, I thank you very much. We value our relationship, and we look forward to a long-term relationship that is as valuable to us as I hope ours is to you. So, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Tom, do you want to speak?
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, it's good to see you, Bob. Sitting there thinking we've been here for 17 years, since '98, and we'll be renewing again in 2018. So I'll be back before you then. And it's generally a little more contentious than this is, so I'm enjoying this. And we're particularly proud, Framingham and his wisdom, we work together in a partnership of another sort, along with the public access folks and the government access channels and educational access. We also provide over 600 miles of fiber, which is an integral part of our own network. It's highly reliable and serves all the town's data needs. I know it does, and I know you've come to rely on it in a significant way. And we've worked with Jamie Schiavone here in town, and it seems like endlessly expanding the institutional network, as we call it, to pumping stations and DPW sites and water sites, all kinds of things that the town is asking for, and in some cases willing to pay for the construction. So we appreciate that partnership as well. And we particularly enjoy working with Ron and making sure that not only the public can hear you, but see you so clearly that I think you should include makeup in your budget. So it's a pleasure.
Ron warned me when I first came on the board. Go with makeup.
We have the capacity to do HD. Danny Arto, as Ron mentioned, said, when Ron said, could we do HD? We've got the cameras. My knee-jerk reaction was always, no, it's too much bandwidth on our system. And our technical folks said, no, we could do that. I think we could do that. And so came back, absent any renewal, hooks or anything, just said, we'll be happy to do that and provide that kind of capacity. And we put it on a channel that isn't just lost somewhere up in the digital tiers. It's right in our broadcast tier. So if someone's surfing through, they might wake up on your face and come to life and learn a lot about the government. So we're proud of that, too. We've got a good location. You have a good system. You have a good support staff here. And we're proud to be a part of the effort. So,
well, we thank you very much. And I know it's just a coincidence that I got my RCN bill in the mail today, and it went up by $6 from last month.
And it's still a bargain.
Still a bargain? I don't know about that.
Don't get me going on the cost of programming.
Thank you. And we appreciate your efforts to bring better quality service to the town. Thank you.
Listen.
I'm sorry?
With Bob.
With Bob. Okay, Bob, you can go. Sorry.
We don't
want to break the camera. No, that's all right. That's all right. What is that? Is that my phone? What? What's the code, please? No. How long have you been doing this? Since you've been in town.
Yes.
Yep.
Are we doing pictures here?
All right, that's right. A little bit in run. Yeah. In 1 second.
You got film in there?
Yeah.
That's a great
Great. Thank you. All right, great. Yeah, thank you very much. Great stuff.
Thank you very much.
Great job.
Okay. We do not have anyone signed up for public participation, so we'll go to Next item on the agenda is a meeting with town council to talk about the open meeting law and a public records complaint. Mr. Petrini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in your packets, there should be two complaints dated February 17, 2015, from Ms. Deborah Butler. And with the permission of the board, I would ask permission to work with the chairman and the town manager to preparing an appropriate response and serving it by the deadline. So.
A motion? Sure.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thanks,
Thank you.
Chris. And the next item, you're going to be here for this in case there's any questions, is authorization for the Mass Works grant to authorize the town accountant to create the developer's matching fund account, designate the chief engineer to authorize payment requests from the Mass Works grant for River Path Drive, which has been approved, and because the money's already been received by the state?
My understanding is the money the Mass Work grants has been received, but we're still waiting for the until when this agreement's signed, then we'll get the matching portion from the developer. But yes, this is the next step along that process. And with the chairman's and the board's permission, if I could ask Mr. Sedowitz and Mr. Johnson from DPW to come up and just give like a very brief summary. I think it'd be helpful just to give a little bit of back in a couple minutes.
Good evening, Bill Sedowitz, Department of Public Works. As the board knows, the town has been working cooperatively with the Danforth Green team on a number of matters. Tonight we're here to discuss the improvements to River Path Drive, which is an accepted street off of Old Connecticut Path. It's also the primary access to the Danforth Green project. Working together, we've been able to secure a $1 million grant, as we just discussed. We publicly bid the project and are ready to execute a construction contract with LaRusso Corporation. Tonight we're here to discuss a couple of the agreements that we need to put in place before we can move forward. So there's two agreements we'll discuss tonight, and then hopefully in early March we'll come back for some right-of-way, some access agreements. But the two agreements tonight are a payment agreement, which is needed to memorialize terms and conditions needed to supplement some private funds being provided by Danforth Green to fully fund the project. And then the second is an assignment agreement. The design for this work was contracted privately between Danforth Green and VHB. So what this agreement does is makes the town a party to that agreement. So since we're going to be overseeing the construction work, the town has a contractual relationship with the design work. So we're anxious to move forward, so hopefully we can get these two agreements in place, and then if the weather cooperates, we're prepared to move forward pretty aggressively. The intent is to have the project substantially complete, full beneficial use of the road by the end of May. So that's a pretty aggressive timeline, but that's what the developers had wanted, and we're prepared to move forward as aggressively as we can given the weather constraints.
So Bill, the state grant is paying for a portion of the construction, and the developer is paying for the balance, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And what's the balance that the developers?
So we anticipate to fund the construction contract, the construction oversight contract, and potential contingencies during construction. The total project cost could be $1.5 million. So the state grant is for $1 million, and we'd be looking for an agreement for slightly over $530,000 to cover the rest of the project costs.
Okay. Thank you.
And just Mr. Chairman, a couple of quick points. And the developer has agreed to that funding level, and also we did verify, we worked with the Department of Revenue to make certain that this payment agreement complied with the MGL because it's somewhat unusual. We haven't done many of these in this community, and so this does have the blessing of the Department of Revenue, which I think is helpful in that regard. So.
Okay.
I just have one question, and as often happens, there could be overages or something unexpected happens in the process. And is the developer, is he willing to sign on to take that responsibility as well?
Yeah, so we built contingency into the payment agreement to make sure there was some additional funds needed, and then whatever becomes unspent at the end of the project would be returned to him.
And in terms of anything that might come out legally, is the town covered for any liability issue?
Yes, the standard language in the payment agreement with our standard indemnity clause in that document, and then the VHB will have an agreement directly with the town for some of its engineering services. The assignment agreement, however, states that we had to accept the existing agreement for VHB with the developer with its standard language, which didn't have the helpful language that I insist on in there. But Bill and I discussed that today, and we have a high level of confidence that the design work that we are assuming from VHB is of a fairly routine nature, and I think we can speak to that. But any new design, we would insist on our contract. But because it's an assignment, we had less leverage to insist on new terms. So.
Hey, I just want to ask Town Council, do you want these as three separate motions, Chris?
I think one omnibus motion should be sufficient. If you wish, or you can do them three, however you would wish to do it. Either way is fine.
Well, I'll just offer a motion then as printed in our background materials for items 1, 2, and 3, which basically authorizes the town manager to execute the attached payment agreement on behalf of the board, authorizes the town accountant to create a special account, and to designate Chief Engineer William Sedgwitz to review invoices and authorize payment requests from the MassWorks grant and the private developer account.
Okay.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to begin tonight by just noting last night's planning workshop in Knobscott Village, and really shouting out a big thank you and appreciation to the, I believe it was probably close to 175 Knobscott neighbors and residents that came out on a really frigid, icy night to talk about the future of Knobscott. And if you were there at the start, you kind of knew that turnout kind of caught us by surprise. If you've been to these kind of forums, 50, 60 people is a huge success. So we had a turnout that was probably 3 times what our expectation was. But once we got people settled into individual work groups, I think we wound up with 6 of them. It was really, it was quite rewarding to see the amount of interaction that we got, and folks felt that we got a lot of good information in the course of the meeting. We had a very healthy discussion about the shopping center at the conclusion of that meeting, but I think we tried to make the point at the start that there was a lot more to talk about in terms of Knobscott and its potential and its challenges and opportunities than just the shopping center. But we had a very healthy discussion about the realities and where we stand on the shopping center. And I also just want to say there were a lot of people that came up after that meeting that really, it was really refreshing to hear the support and the understanding for what we're trying to do. And while things were a little frustrating early in the meeting, I think people felt that in the end it really did work. So Thursday night we have a comparable meeting in Saxonville. I've told our friends from Saxonville that Knobscott set the bar kind of high, and on the other hand we've got a bigger room, and I think we'll be a little better prepared for such a large turnout. So I just wanted to start with that because I really did think that was just an amazing statement of how much passion there is in Knobscott for their village and their neighborhood. The next thing on the agenda is I want to acknowledge that late last week we filed the Phase 1 environmental report on the Mary Dennison Park. It's a sign of progress in our evolving relationship with Avery Dennison on the evaluation and eventual mitigation of the conditions at Mary Dennison. We agreed that we would file a joint Phase 1 report, and that our report, while it's standing alone at DEP, was basically combined with the Avery Dennison results, and that Phase 1 report was actually filed by Avery Dennison. And we look forward now to beginning a closer discussion with Avery Dennison about responsibilities as we enter into the phase now of talking about remediation and a fix. We're going to have Carol Boyce, the town's Public Health Division licensed site professional, in on what will now be March 17th, it would appear, to do a joint presentation to the Board of Selectmen, the Parks Commission, and the Board of Health on everything that we've learned since July of 2014 to the filing of this report last week, including what we know from the Avery Dennison testing that was done, and really begin to focus a discussion now on where we think this is going in terms of reopening the park, cleaning up the soil with the lead, and moving forward with some remediation. So expect that we would have a pretty detailed presentation for you and the other two boards I mentioned on March 17th. On 350 Irving Street, of course, the Zoning Board of Appeals is hearing the application from Landscape Depot on a special permit for the landscaping and related business activity, and there have been reports and recommendations filed from the Conservation Commission, the Board of Health, and our fire department on operating conditions that need to be met in order for Landscape Depot to receive a special permit. So that is happening tonight as the board meets. The Group Health Insurance Commission has released health plan information for fiscal year 2016. They do contemplate some plan design that will be of interest to employees, and that plan description is available at the Group Insurance Commission's website, which I think at some point we'll probably post at our municipal website so that people can find it fairly easily, and that we'll be meeting with the Employee Bargaining Committee on Health Insurance late this week to begin the process of talking about some of those plan design changes and what they mean for employees in the town. I mentioned Scott and Saxville Master Plan. There'll be a further discussion tonight on the Traffic, Roadway, and Safety Committee. Held a special meeting last week to address some of the concerns that we heard discussed concerning Dunkin' Donut on Franklin Street. And I want to mention that there is a significant event on Friday afternoon being hosted by the school department, which is a school safety and security forum that will feature, I understand, a captivating speaker who is a parent who lost a child in the Sandy Hook elementary school shooting 2 years ago, that not only gives a very telling step-by-step description of what happened that day, but has a lot of lessons to be learned in terms of school security and how to protect our children from those types of security challenges. And then lastly, there was a request from Representative Walsh that perhaps the Selectmen might consider exploring a resolution that is working its way through the legislature around the prevalence of natural gas leaks in the natural gas distribution system. And at some point, I think we'll talk to the board about, or unless Selectman Lee would like to tonight.
Yeah, I just will say one comment to the board. Representative Walsh did call me about this. It is, as the town manager said, all about keeping the gas companies accountable for the leaks that occur in their system, which they apparently are charging to their customers. So it would not only help the customers not get charged for gas they're not receiving, but make the companies find these leaks and seal them. And so what this is about is that there's a bill of which Representative Walsh is a party to in the House to bring forward to the House and get it passed. And he's asking different towns to support it at town meeting. He has offered to come in and speak to the board about it. He wants us to consider co-sponsoring this with him on the town meeting warrant. He would give the presentation. I mean, I told him that, I'm certainly not prepared to speak towards it at this point, and he would come in here and do that with the board. And he would also go to town meeting and be the presenter and answer questions. So.
Okay. And, of course, he'll be in, we're setting up that meeting with the legislative delegation later in March, so he could probably speak to the board on the subject.
He could, but we might want to consider it before we close the warrant.
Which we're doing tonight, I believe. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So including this in there would be his request.
Okay. And that's my report. Oh, wait a minute. Several weeks ago we had a series of complaints and observations about activity in downtown Framingham that had some comments about the Framingham Police Department. The Chief of Police could not be here 2 weeks ago, but is here tonight to just kind of close out some of those complaints or comments that were made about responsiveness from the Framingham Police Department. So Chief Ferguson is here tonight to just kind of close out this episode and this set of comments.
Good evening, Chief. Good evening, sir. So when I heard that Joe was here, I I was surprised at what he reported because we've been communicating throughout, his tenure downtown, and for most of the time it's been positive. So what he reported to you guys first was that I wasn't responsive to his emails. The email in question he had sent to me on a Sunday at about 2:30 in the morning, and I responded to it at about 9 a.m. Sunday morning. We have that relationship where he can send me emails anytime, text, call me. During that email, he was positive. He was reporting that things were going well. And then as the email went on, he wanted to get a harassment prevention order, and I assigned an officer the next day to assist him to do that. We also had an officer waiting for him at the courthouse, Stacy McCarter, who's our DV investigator, who has a lot of experience around these types of orders, to assist him at the courthouse. But I think what happened, I'm not 100% sure, but what I think what happened was he had to apply for the order where he was from, not from where the offense was occurring. So he went to the court in the city where he was from, but he was successful in getting the order. And then he reported that he had called the police and asked for a response, and that we didn't respond. We played a tape. I sent him the tape, and he apologized for making that report to you guys. He had called to confirm whether or not there was a no trespass order against the person who he had been having a problem with. I guess he had a conversation with this person. The person told him it was a public place, and there was no trespass order against him, and that was false. There was a trespass order, and the dispatcher took the call, handled it textbook. It couldn't have been handled any better. And like I say, I sent that call to Joe, and he apologized for misspeaking. And, I'll just close out. I don't think that Joe came here trying to undermine the police or be dishonest. I just think that he has a lot of frustrations, and it sometimes affects his judgment. So we continue to work with Joe and everybody else downtown. We set up an action plan to hopefully deal better and more effectively with what's going on in the area where his business is. But like I say, all the reports that I've gotten to him previously, he's been very supportive of the police and happy with the response we've given him. We have, you guys have a report in front of you. If you review that report, if you want any more information or you want us to expand on any information there, we'd be happy to do it. But we have two very proactive officers down there. I mean, I agree with what Chief Cowles said, that you can't arrest your way out of these issues, but I think it's kind of a multi-tiered response where it should be treatment-focused, but I also think there is areas for enforcement, and we're engaging in enforcement where we think we should, and I think that we've been effective. As we get more officers out of the academy, staffing increases, we intend on putting 2 more officers downtown. So in addition to the officers assigned to what we call Area B, we're going to have 4 officers dedicated to the downtown area.
Okay. Chief, right after that meeting, it was announced that the place was closing. Is that going to have any impact at all on Joe's issues?
Well, when we decided to enact the place, one of the first things we talked about the town manager was that we didn't want to have a name, but everything ends up with a name whether you like it or not.
It's called the place.
It's called the place. So, but that was a meeting of key stakeholders in the town, representatives from SMOC, the town manager, the assistant town manager, United Way, advocates, a lot of key providers, key stakeholders to put that plan together. So moving forward, I was going to send Jerry Desolitz an email. I'll probably send it tomorrow. We need to have another one of those meetings with the key stakeholders to put together a transition plan. We never had the intention of just closing that establishment. We have to have a plan in place so that these people are properly cared for, and we don't run into the problems that we had before we opened.
Yes, Lauren.
I brought this up to the town manager at the last time we discussed this, and I think it's really critical that one of the key stakeholders is the state. And we used to have these forums where we brought the state departments, which are funding a lot of the services that the organizations are operating, that they need to really be kept, in the loop and part of the solution. whether it's more funding or finding other programs for the people there.
So I think that's a very, very critical point, because much that contributes to this problem is that people are in and out of various programs, but then on their own for large portions of the day. At which point they may be waiting for the Salvation Army to open 5 hours from now to hand out a meal, but meanwhile they're kind of hanging around. And so I think, somehow the state needs to come to grips with, there's a better way of caring for these people than just having them sit around on the street.
Right, and very often they're, part of the state programming where they're placing people. So I think that we used to have a couple of these summits with them over the period of a year, if you recall. And they were willing to step up and have some accountability, and their relationship with the police department was going to be really the key communication for the town. And I think we need to keep them on the fire for that.
So I'll just touch on a few things. Our relationship is excellent. We have, I think that we've been able to prevent and reduce things from happening in Framingham because of the relationship that we have with the major providers in Framingham. Sean Riley does a great job, and we meet with the major providers once a month, and more often if we need to. We have a lot of their sites in our database so that we can engage in problem solving before things get out of hand. And I think it's greatly has helped us in preventing and reducing things from occurring in Framingham. This endeavor is an example of these pooling our resources. There was no money for this this particular endeavor. There was no money. This was clearly an act of all of us pooling our resources so that we could try this to try to enhance downtown Framingham and control some of the activity downtown. For years we've tried to get funding. Years ago, we applied for a community development block grant to get a case manager to do exactly what you're talking about, try to manage some of the time when some of our high-risk, not high-need people weren't programming. We've never been successful in doing that. So,
and again, I'll just maybe this is a further conversation, but I'll say that that's exactly the point. We shouldn't be struggling for funding and trying to pull things together. If these are people from state placements, the state needs to step up and take some responsibility.
Yeah, a lot of these, and I agree with you, but I think you should remember too. A lot of these people are treatment resistant. We meet once a month. We have a collaborative group that meets once a month to talk about the resistant. We have about 15 to 25 people in Framingham that are some are homeless, some aren't. They spend a lot of time downtown, utilizing the services that they want to that are treatment resistant. And unfortunately, in my experience, there's just no easy answers when you're dealing with that population. But we continue to march on. Like I say, we meet once a month. We've been meeting for a couple of years now. It's a collaborative group to try to come up with answers, and we've been successful in a few cases, but it's a tough population.
So we've talked about having the state help out. We've talked about the feedback that you got from them. So what's the action plan? What have you guys worked out?
It's in the action plan.
I see that piece, but Chief, 248 calls within a 12-month period. To me, tell me if I'm wrong, is it a lot of calls?
Well,
I know it's spread out, talks about a couple different places, but it seems like a lot of calls.
If you look at what's pushing that, though, it's medicals. And traditionally, I think you have 69 medicals. Mm-hmm. I looked at the previous year. I was sitting in front of my computer. I know just enough to get myself in trouble when it comes to analysis, right? So I looked at the previous year, and they've almost doubled. And we have that with high-risk, high-need people during extreme weather, whether it's extremely hot or extremely cold. We have these medicals that we've always dealt with. So that's what's pushing it. But
I know you have it here for us, but since you came in to report it, could you kind of give the public an overview as what the police department's decided to make as an action plan?
Yes, sir.
That'd be helpful. Thank you, Chief.
Sir. So to deal with what's been going on downtown recently, we put in our database, in our CAD system, the request for 2 compliance checks a day. So twice a day, officers, the beat officers downtown are required to check in at the place and its sophistications to make sure everything's going okay. And this is just a compliance check. Also, we've required every time there's an incident, sophistications, the officer has to write a report. A lot of times, only 20% of our calls require a report normally. 50,000 calls for service, about 10,000 case numbers. But any time they go to sophistications on a call, they have to write a report. We want to document what's going on so that we get a better picture of what's going on. We've educated the business owners around the area. It seems simple. We always, if you see something, say something, but we still struggle with underreporting. In a diverse community, often you deal with underreporting, and we're still dealing, hearing things third hand and confirming it, and still not being able to answer the question, why didn't you call us right away? But people have their reasons, and we're dealing with that all the time, with outreach. And all cases of trespassing, often when you get a call for trespassing and you go there, the person's gone. And there's not a lot of follow-up, I'll be honest with you, because it's not a serious offense. But we're going to require the officers that when they get a call of trespassing and sophistications, that they're going to investigate it, that they're going to try to identify who it is. And if the person's there, we can arrest. It's a misdemeanor in your presence. But if the person's walked off the property, even though we well know the person was there, when the officer gets there, if the person's 5 feet off the property, there's no right of arrest. But you can still summons them to court. And we're requiring the officers to do that. So we're taking a more proactive approach in dealing with the trespassing incidents in and around sophistications.
Okay. Chief, thank you for coming in and giving that report. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the town manager? Questions or comments? You're all set?
All set, thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is our public hearing section. The first hearing is consideration of new officer and director, new stockholder, and the transfer of stock for the wine and malt package store license at Bazaar West, 855 Worcester Road. Good evening.
Good evening, members of the board. Mr. Chairman, my name is John Delpret, and I represent LA Inc. With regards to this change of officers and directors. Basically, it's just a management shuffle. Nobody's really, no big change other than Margarita Kuklis is resigning, giving her shares of stock to her father, Igor, who's been elected president, subject to the board's approval, of course, and who will be receiving her shares. It's just a gift from her to him. There's no consideration involved. She lives in Brooklyn, and he's just going to take over running the business here. He's mostly in the store as it stands now, and he's being officially elected, to that position. So my voice is going tonight, but we just like the board's approval for the transfer of stock as well as the change of directors and officers.
No change in manager, no physical changes in the store.
Chairman, I'd make a motion that we approve the transfer of stock.
Second.
We can do them separately.
Whatever. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Also make a motion that we approve the change of the stockholder as well.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's a vote.
And then third, Mr. Chair, I make a motion for the new officer/director.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's a vote.
Thank you.
Okay, you're all set.
Thank you very much.
Next item has been continued for several meetings now is the transfer license at 358 Waverly Street by Sanford Restaurant Group, and we have been requested to allow them to withdraw that application.
You need a motion?
Yeah, we'll try to take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we allow the withdrawal of this license
Actually,
application.
can I make a motion before that and untable it because we tabled it to a certain time? We need to do that before we make another motion.
Yep.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of taking it off the table?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Now a motion to allow the withdrawal.
Second.
All those in favor of allowing that petition to be withdrawn?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And it is withdrawn. Thank you. And the last hearing is consideration for common victuals license, change location for Dunkin' Donuts at 430 Franklin Street. This was tabled from our last meeting, so this could be referred and reviewed by the Traffic and Roadway Safety Committee, which was done last night. Mr. Galvani.
Mr. Chair, motion on table. Discussion.
I'm sorry.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
You're welcome.
All those in favor of taking it off the table?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Mr. Galvani.
Good evening. Galvani. I represent CD Realty LLC, and with me is Dean and Stephen Alapidi, who are the owners. After the meeting and in preparation for the meeting with the Traffic and Roadway Safety Committee and discussions with Steve and Dean, we proposed 7 different proposed conditions of approval, which were, I believe you have those in front of you, and those were reviewed and considered before the TRC last evening. Just a few comments on them. They're mostly self-explanatory, but number 1, regarding a parking lot attendant. They're going to have an employee during the busy morning hours. The peak hours of the store are roughly between 7 and 9:30, in that general range, to assist people in parking. And for instance, we would anticipate the first spaces to be used would be the spaces right in front along Franklin Street, and there are spaces behind, so that's one thing that person would be looking at. And also, in the past, as the board is aware, because the shopping center has been basically empty, some large trucks have parked in there to patronize the business. That's not going to be able to continue, and there really isn't parking available in close proximity for trucks. So we anticipate that business is not going to continue. But to the extent that, for instance, large trucks do come there, the attendant will be, advising them that there's really no place for them to park close by. So we hope that this particular condition will not be necessary long term, but they will have the attendant there when they open, and there's going to be a learning curve here. And obviously, with the snow conditions right now, it's well aware of the situation on the street. So. And again, the others are self-explanatory. We do actually have in writing now a letter from the Elks allowing parking for up to seven spaces during daytime hours. So the employees will be parking off-site, leaving the 16 spaces available for customers. And again, if the board in the future decides on restrictions on some of the nearby residential streets, we had volunteered to pay for the location of those signs. They will impose a seating limit for customers at the tables of 20 minutes maximum. We'll be using staffing sufficient to provide for orderly and quick service during the peak hours. And finally, we'll remove snow from the parking lot within reasonable time after any snow events. So those are the conditions, and we are amenable to having those put into the license.
Thank you. And Eric, Chairman of the Traffic and Roadway Safety Committee, you're going to give a quick report on last night's meeting.
Thank you. Eric Johnson, Department of Public Works and Traffic Roadway Safety Committee. Yeah, we met yesterday, February 23rd, to discuss the proposed Dunkin' Donuts. It's important to note that the purview really is regulatory issues within the right-of-way. So the agenda item we officially reviewed was the parking restrictions on Day Hill Road and Stevens Road. But nonetheless, concerning the board's concern at the previous meeting, we did open a discussion on parking capacity and overall traffic impacts and allowed that broader discussion to report back to the board. Prior to the meeting, Mr. Galvani had provided those 7 concessions that you had before you. with those 7 concessions, there was a consensus at the TRC that they actually provide reasonable protection to the overall traffic and parking impacts of the surrounding area. The TRC voted no action on the official item of the parking restrictions on Day Hill and Stevens Road, but we did agree to revisit the issue in 6 months to actually see how it's being executed. Is the operations of the Dunkin' Donuts causing traffic impacts? And I encouraged all the abutters that were at that meeting to come to us and let us know if there's impacts.
Thanks, Chair. And just so the board members know, I was at the meeting. I'm the board's representative to that, and Mr. Mahoney represents the planning board, and he was at the meeting last night. And we did have residents from Day Hill Road, and they they actually agreed with the position of the Traffic and Roadway Safety Committee is making to the Board of Selectmen tonight to go ahead and approve the common victuals license, with the understanding that if it creates any problems in the future on Day Hill Road or Stevens Road, that the Traffic and Roadway Safety Committee will revisit the issue and determine at a later date whether or not parking restrictions are warranted. And as you note, you can note in one of these, on item number 4, the applicant has agreed to pay the cost of any signs that they be required to implement the parking restrictions. So everybody seemed to be happy with the outcome of that, and we're recommending as a committee that this board grant the common victuals permit. Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. A comment and then something to ponder for the board. First and foremost, the one thing that I'm a little weary of, and I would like to see it stricken from this, a 20-minute seating limit for customers will be imposed and enforced. I'd be okay with that during peak hours, but let folks come in and sit down on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock where there's no peak hours, and let them stay for now if they want to gather as a community and have a meeting there. I don't have a problem limiting them, but I would say that limit should be peak hours only. If folks in the community want to come in and sit down and spend time there, so be it. But I prefer to see that specifically and only around peak hours. If the board would be amendable to that, Mr. Chair, I think the rest of it looks good. I'm very pleased to see this. I also want to make a comment as well. I really appreciated the board's position 2 weeks ago to really take into consideration what the neighborhoods had to say. I appreciate the traffic committee coming back so quickly with a recommendation to the board. I think the board did a good job by having a good overview, talking about with our neighbors, and making sure we made the right decision. And they're a great business. They've been in town for a long time. I've driven by 2 times. It's a great-looking building. So I'll be voting for this tonight. But the one thing I would ask the board to do is not to minimize the 20-minute seat limits for customers all the time, but maybe during peak hours, and let folks conglomerate and come down and have meetings and so forth. That would just be a recommendation I would have.
In response to that, appreciate that. That really is the intention, and that's maybe the only time it's necessary. So I would request that.
I want it in writing to make sure people know that. Okay.
Absolutely.
That'd be what I'd be amenable to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I second what Mr. Smith said, the whole thing. I mean, I think that it's worked out really well for the residents, and I really want to thank the owners for being such a great business and really just being a good neighbor. You've had a lot of, goodwill has developed out of this, and I hope that just starts a great relationship with the neighborhood, and a lot of more people, more customers will come because of it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to just start by offering a motion to grant the common victuals license with the 7 conditions as amended, as recommended by Mr. Smith, amending item 5.
I'll second.
And just a couple of comments. I think when we had the discussion a few weeks ago, the residents from Day Hill Road made a pretty good case about the problems in their neighborhood. I think at one point during that discussion, however, they did suggest that it may well be the nursing homes overflow parking that's impacting their neighborhood. So I would want us to evaluate, whether it's the business across Franklin Street or whether it's the nursing home that's evaluating this before the business picks up the cost of the signage. I mean, I think that it would only be fair that if it really is the nursing home, that we really should be dealing with that situation. But that being said, I think we've come to a good conclusion here for the neighborhood and certainly for the business, and I will wholeheartedly support this evening.
Sure.
I'm very happy to see that we were able to get the Roadway and Traffic Safety Committee together in time, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for doing that. in order to be able to get this done within 2 weeks. And I wish the business a great deal of luck.
Okay, on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's a vote. Good luck.
Good luck.
Sir, thank you.
Now, next item on the agenda is a joint meeting with our friends from the planning board.
Can we do have some seats at the table here if they'd like to take advantage?
Stephanie, welcome as chairman.
Thank you.
And you want to call your...
We are actually in session. We convened at 7 o'clock in the planning board office, so we're actually in session at the moment.
We welcome you. You're always welcome here. You know that.
Thank you.
And Ms. Manager, you want to set the table for this presentation?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to set the table. This very significant presentation tonight from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council is the culmination of about 24 months of discussion at various levels within Framingham that actually began in March of 2013 with a series of very small, informal, roundtable discussions on development potential in downtown Framingham. The roundtables took place in the context of a 2009 development vision that the town was pretty invested in, but obviously a lot happened after 2009 in terms of the financial crisis, the whole housing market crisis, and so as we came out of that, one of the questions we asked in the initial roundtables was what was it about downtown Framingham and its commuter rail station that Framingham did not see what's known as transit-oriented development in the nature of other communities with similar downtowns and similar commuter rail stations. Waltham, Lowell, Haverhill, Medford, and other transit-oriented centers of activity. So the framework for those early roundtables was we actually had some neutral, experienced developers who had successfully done transit-oriented development in communities like Waltham, in Haverhill, in Medford, and they offered 3 pieces of advice based on their familiarity and knowledge of the Framingham zoning bylaw. Their points were that the density in downtown Framingham was not high enough to really create critical mass for a serious developer to come in and aggregate properties and do things at a scale that would be subject to investment. So not enough density to create critical mass. The second was that we had a parking requirement that applied a suburban parking standard in an urban environment that really didn't reflect the nature of the TOD market, the transit-oriented development market, which is depend on commuter rail for maybe one spouse to go to Boston, and then the one car in the household might be available. So it's a reduced parking requirement. The stricter parking requirement just added a lot of cost for a developer to carry, particularly in a market that might be described as emerging in Framingham and not proven. And then lastly, a need for flexibility and certainty, and in particular the comment in a mixed-use downtown vision, don't require retail as a mandatory element in advance of the retail market being there to support the development. Otherwise, that's yet another cost that you have to carry in the short term. And of course, our zoning bylaw does that. So out of that emerged a pretty strong consensus, in particular as we kind of built out the number of people and the breadth of people participating in these roundtables. We really developed a fairly strong consensus around a vision for downtown Framingham consistent with the 2009 vision, but really emphasizing a high-density, mixed-use residential center, and in particular a center that could provide skilled workforce for a lot of the technology employers and skilled employers that operate in the Metro West region, some of whom send buses into Cambridge and Boston to bring workforce out at present. A walkable, pedestrian-centric, urban, amenities-driven environment downtown. where multicultural and diversity is a strength for attracting a younger, skilled workforce to come live in Framingham. And then most importantly, one that offered a lot of transportation choice, not only around commuter rail and the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, but walkable, bikeable, and generally not car dependent in a way that much of our development in Framingham is. So over the 24 months, we've had 8 of those sessions. We've explored those 3 pieces of advice: density, parking, and flexibility. And about 15 months ago, with support from the Mass Office of the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, which was intrigued by that vision and the progress we were making, committed $165,000 to engage the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to update our 2009 vision and really develop a solid action plan for Framingham to take these steps to really drive home development in our downtown area. In that 15 months, they've conducted a thorough and very thoughtful analysis of market conditions in downtown Framingham, looked at our zoning bylaw, and looked at land use, and a sense of how to create the place that would be pedestrian and walkable. And then lastly, the transportation investments that we've been asking Mass DOT to invest in as supporting that, which of those investments really support this vision. All of this culminated last October in a series of very far-reaching neighborhood engagement forums, a really rock-solid major community here at Nevins Hall, where at least 100, if not 200 residents and stakeholders from all around Framingham weighed in on the specifics of what they thought they'd like to see downtown. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure, therefore, at the end of this process, as Metropolitan Area Planning Council wraps up its work, to allow them to present to this board and to the planning board an overview of their findings and their recommendations and what they've developed as an action plan for Framingham to move on its vision. And before I do that, I just want to acknowledge a few people. Selectman Lee has been the board's liaison on downtown issues and has been involved in the roundtable discussions from the very start. The previous chairman of the planning board, Christine Lawden, was there in the first year, and the current chairman of the planning board has been active for the past year as representing the planning board. I see State Representative Chris Walsh has been an active participant, offering a valuable state perspective. I noticed Steve Scholl, who's the chairman of the town meetings standing committee on planning and zoning, beginning, I guess, late last summer or early fall. The chairman and several of his members, I think Dan Rao and Walter Adamski, have sat in. And then last but not least, our own Director of Community and Economic Development, Art Robert, has really played a key role in the past year and a half to really pull all of this together. So this is really, I think, a very exciting time for Framingham, and it's a great pleasure to introduce Eric Halverson, who's been the project manager at Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and he and his colleagues will walk you through a slide presentation that will really summarize the plan, but the focus tonight is really central business district changes that we think are really critical to achieving what we'd like to do downtown. So with that, Eric Halverson.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for sharing your evening and agenda with us, and thanks, Bob, for that really wonderful review. I think it's going to make my job a lot easier. Just quickly, as Bob mentioned, my name is Eric Halverson. I'm the Assistant Director of the Transportation Division at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. We're the regional planning agency for the greater Boston region. And joining me this evening is my colleague, Matt Smith, who's been working very closely with me. So we're going to kind of tag team this presentation a little bit. I'm going to give a really quick overview, building a little bit on what Bob mentioned. Matt's really going to dive into the specifics on the zoning component, specific to the central business zoning district. So with that, this was about an 8-month process or so. MAPC was the lead, and we organized a team of a couple of other consultants that I just want to mention at the beginning. We worked with RKG Associates and LDS Associates on the market analysis piece, both residential and commercial. We worked with the Cecil Group, who I know is doing some work now in Framingham as well, and some other neighborhoods on the urban design component, and then Greenman Peterson Inc., who helped us out with the transportation side of things. buildings. So it was really a team effort and a really, really strong team. So just tonight, an overview of the planning process. I'm going to share with you some key findings of the overall downtown plan, and then Matt's going to jump in and talk about some of the new zoning for the Central Business District. So, as Bob mentioned, back in 2009, there was a downtown vision plan, a pretty high-level plan, and coming out of that plan, I think, well, at least pulled out of that, there were really three kind of high-level goals coming out of there. One, focusing on the historic buildings in the downtown, right? Concord Street, Union Street, down in Hollis. There's some really good historic bones to downtown Framingham, but there's a couple of kind of missing teeth along the way. But really focusing on renovating those historic buildings, getting the most out of those really great urban fabric and historic fabric in the downtown. Two, developing some of those underutilized properties for new housing and supporting new businesses in the downtown. In between some of those historic buildings, there might be a really big surface parking lot right on your main street. So thinking about, is that the highest and best use for that particular property? Three, increasing pedestrian activity and taking advantage of public transportation. As Bob mentioned, this idea about transit-oriented development, building around the public transportation assets, the Metro West and the commuter rail station. But one of the key pieces of that is increasing pedestrian activity, making sure people can walk, from the neighborhood, from the parking lots, wherever they're coming from the businesses to those public transportation assets is really important in a downtown. So in 2013 through sort of 2014, coming out of that, we all kind of know what happened after 2009. The recession hit. Not a lot of development was happening. This wasn't something just in Framingham. It was all over the country, quite frankly. But the interesting thing was, I think that recession did something to the marketplace where developers kind of reset and they looked back at, I'm sorry, I must have the timing on, I apologize. But they kind of went back and they re-looked at downtowns. They looked at locations that had great access to public transportation. They said, this is kind of where the market's going. It's going there for the younger generation. It's going there for the older generation. People want good, walkable, transit-oriented environments. So it was a really interesting time, I think, for Framingham to take another look at downtown and create this roundtable, which, as Bob mentioned, was a great working group, especially for us, almost acted like a steering committee for the downtown of a lot of great stakeholders. And coming out of that roundtable formulated a vision. This is a really shortened version of it. It's much longer. But, looking at it as a vibrant, diverse, multicultural center that can really be a hub of economic activity, not only for Framingham, but really for Metro West. So here we are in 2014, 2015, MAPC working with our consultants and working with the town on this whole downtown vision effort to really take a deeper dive, building on what was done in 2009, but looking at kind of four specific things. One, updating the market analysis to try to figure out what is the demand for residential development, what is the demand for commercial development now for the future in downtown Framingham. That really helps to set the stage for what the possibilities are in the future. The second piece is development feasibility, really kind of getting into the nuts and bolts. If you were a developer coming into downtown Framingham and looking to build a building, and it could be something of small size, medium size, large size, whatever it might be, what are the constraints that you might bump up against financially, regulatory, infrastructure, those types of things. So we took a couple, and I'll go into this in a minute, but we took a couple of test parcels and really looked at, what's going to make development work in downtown Framingham. We looked at the zoning. I'm not going to touch on that too much. Matt's going to really go into that, both the existing Central Business District zoning and then what might actually work with the development feasibility. And really setting the stage from the regulatory side of things for developers to come in, and then looking at transportation enhancements, walking, biking, public transportation. How are people going to get around? So just to give you a sense, these are two sort of concentric circles around the T-stop here. The first one is about a quarter-mile walk or about a 5 to 8 minute walk. The second outside yellow circle is about a 10 to 12-minute walk or a half-mile radius. When we talk about transit-oriented development, we usually talk about kind of the quarter-mile area and the half-mile area. That seems to be about the distance people are comfortable walking to access public transportation. So I think that kind of made a natural boundary for our study. Here you can just kind of see real quick that the 5 and 10 minute walk really encompasses pretty much all of downtown, even kind of goes into some of the more residential neighborhoods that surround the downtown. Here's a quick map of our downtown study area just to get a sense of kind of the size of the area that we looked at. I would say the primary focus was really on the CB, which is the kind of green zoning district here. But we wanted to get a sense of the whole area just to make sure we didn't miss anything, making sure that we're getting those connections from other zoning districts into the downtown. And especially from a transportation connectivity standpoint, it's always good to kind of look a little bit outside of the downtown boundary and see how people are connecting in. So our study area boundary was pretty large, but it was very helpful to get a sense of that area. So, just to go through some of the key findings quickly on those 4 different pieces I had described. On the market side of things, on the residential analysis, 3 key points I think that are worth mentioning. One, there is demand in downtown Framingham, probably not surprising, for quality rental stock. I mean, a lot of the market is in multifamily rental housing, especially around public transportation. But there hasn't been a ton of this type of development in the downtown over the last couple of decades, quite honestly. So there's a couple of examples, I think, of some quality stock, but there's not a big critical mass of it. So there's not a lot for developers to use as comps when they're trying to figure out what is a market rate rent. If I'm building a brand new building, there just isn't a lot of good comps. So the other interesting thing that came out was new development might actually start out as moderately sized, maybe only 20 to 40 units in size. So we're really not talking about large projects, but smaller projects that could be built by maybe developers who might be willing to take a little bit of a greater risk in an emerging market, as Bob had mentioned. Smaller project, a little bit less risk, but can prove the market for the bigger people to maybe come in later on and do a larger project when the market has some good comps and the risk has sort of been reduced. And again, that market may strengthen over time and kind of set the stage for a larger project. On the commercial side, there's already a lot of commercial development. I mean, it is a downtown that's pretty much to be expected. But there is some demand for office space, maybe 5,000 to 13,000 square feet. This would probably be more professional office, lawyers, accountants, maybe a dentist, maybe a doctor, something small that might fit well within a downtown. We're not talking about big office campuses or something that you might find in other parts of Framingham. On the retail side, again, there's already a lot of ground floor retail in downtown, which is great. But there might actually be a little bit more room for some other folks to come in over time, especially if the residential development comes in. That ends up building in, we call it rooftops before retail, that ends up building in almost a built-in market for the businesses that are here today, which is great for them, and then businesses who might be here in the future. So maybe about 11,000 to 26,000 square feet. Again, these are estimates. It could be more, it could be less, it could be right in that sweet spot. On the development feasibility, we really wanted to figure out, what's it going to take to get somebody off the ground here. So we just took a couple of test parcels, 3 what we called assemblages. One here on Pearl Street, basically bounded by Pearl, Park Street area. One here over on Howard Street, kind of Randall and Howard. And then one down here, a much bigger assemblage off of Howell Street and Hollis Court. We chose these 3 in concert with the town and with the round table because they kind of offered an interesting case study. Kind of seemed like those could be some early mover assemblages. There's some town-owned there and a lot of privately owned property, so it could be a good synergy, public-private partnership. So we tested some development scenarios on these 3 pieces. And again, I just want to point out, this is completely hypothetical. There's no plans associated with this. This is just to test some build-out. So this just shows the existing building configuration along Pearl, Park, and Franklin. This is what exists today. And then we just did a quick test to see, well, over time, how might this build out if somebody were able to assemble all of this land and put together kind of a comprehensive development vision. So you can see, the buildings they're not huge buildings. They're basically 3, 4, maybe 5 stories at the most. The parking is pretty much contained all in the interior, so you have buildings fronting the street, but you also have nice pedestrian and vehicular access coming off of the main streets into the central parking. So this is kind of just an example of what we did in terms of the development feasibility. But one interesting thing that we learned from this was what is going to actually make development financially feasible here. What's going to make that vision potentially come true? A couple of things. Current residential and commercial rents right now don't necessarily justify the costs of new construction. Again, because the market hasn't necessarily been proven in downtown in quite some time. It's an emerging market. Initial projects would likely be small, but current zoning is really what kind of hurts development feasibility. The parking, quite honestly, is really what does it. If you have to provide surface parking at 2 spaces per residential unit, to get the kind of density that Bob was talking about and what we showed, it would eat up the land so much you really wouldn't be able to do it. And Matt's going to talk a lot more about that. And then some form of, because the market isn't kind of there yet, there might be a need for a public-private partnership. You know, there's a lot of different ways this could play out, but some assistance between the town or the state and private developers might be needed to get some of those early movers off the ground. We also looked at transportation. These are just a couple of snapshots from downtown. You know, pedestrian facilities, sidewalks, crosswalks, streetscape, bike facilities, transit facilities. You know, there's a lot of needs in the downtown that would really help to, if you're going to get a concentration of new development down here, and also to support the existing development, improving the sidewalks, improving the crosswalks, getting nice pedestrian lighting, street trees, benches, you know, the things that you see in a lot of other downtowns is really critical. It sounds like small pieces, but when you add them together, they're really important and they really add to the downtown. And we're not talking about huge dollar investments. I mean, these are things that you can do here and there, make a huge difference. And the town and the state are already partnering on the project right outside the building here on 126. That's going to do a lot of this stuff. That's going to be the catalyst project and the example project that we think will help other side streets like your Howards and your Franklins and your Kendalls to kind of build off that and create a network out into the neighborhoods. So they mentioned just some key findings. Improvements to sidewalks, crosswalks are needed. There's actually almost no bike accommodations today. That can be done in a lot of different ways, and we've kind of laid that out in the report. Improving access between the north and the south sides of downtown for pedestrians primarily. It's really important. You want people to be able to walk, like sort of park once wherever they're going to park and be able to walk around downtown. And creating that consistent streetscape is going to be great. You'll have an awesome foundation on 126 and then kind of building off that. One thing I just wanted to mention quickly, we had a lot of public participation throughout this process. I want to thank everyone who's might be watching this and anyone who's in the room for participating in that, especially house that we held in November. We had over 150 people come to this building for that. We got a ton of input. People really seemed on board with what we were talking about. We also have the TOD roundtable meetings that Bob mentioned, and then we did very specific outreach to residents and business owners in the downtown to really try to get their feedback on what they felt might make downtown a greater opportunity than it is today. And then as we're continuing on with board and committee meetings, we're meeting with you all tonight, the planning board, and then continuing to meet with the standing committee on planning and zoning for town meeting. So we are continuing all that engagement. So just a quick overview of the overall plan. We're just finishing up the report now, working with town staff on getting that out. And with that, I'll just turn it over to Matt to go over the rest.
Hi, everyone, and thanks again for having us. I'm Matt Smith. I'm the Senior Economic Development Planner at MAPC, and I work a lot with different economic development initiatives, but also on zoning that would help to implement those ideas. So what I want to do tonight is just go through three things. One would be just a quick overview of the findings of our review of the zoning, talk quickly about some recommendations, but really focus on those key changes to the CB zoning that we're recommending and which we've drafted some text for. So just quick overview of what we found. We reviewed the entire text. And really what we found is that, particularly as it's related to downtown, the zoning currently is quite restrictive. In particular, one of the key things that's needed to have one of those amenity-rich, active downtown environments is multifamily housing. And that currently is not allowed actually anywhere within Framingham in terms of a multifamily-only building. You can get it within a mixed-use structure or in a reuse, but then only by special permit, which then also leads to another issue is that we did find that the special permit process is actually quite onerous. Most communities will allow some development as of right, but here anything over 8,000 square feet would require that process. In addition, it would also require a site plan review for any size development, and that includes what the development impact assessments, which is much more detailed than most communities. And really what the issue there is that while it brings some predictability and control to the community, it actually can turn away some developers, particularly those smaller developers who really don't have necessarily the money to invest in something that might not happen if it's not approved. So predictability would be important. And then the high parking requirements that Eric already referred to are a significant impediment, particularly that 2 spaces per residential unit. That's an impediment. In terms of what we also found is, like, again, your zoning really should and it must reflect what's actually feasible if you're looking to develop that vision that we've already discussed. And currently what we found out through that process is in order to really make multifamily or mixed use occur here, you're going to need to be able to allow at least 4 to 5 stories of development with a minimum of 36 to 40 dwelling units per acre. And then smaller units, an average of like studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, that would average about 950 square feet a unit, which is actually very reasonable in today's market. And then it would be an average of 1 parking space per unit. And I'm going to talk more on the recommendations of how that would figure out, but rather than the 2, it would be an average of 1. In terms of our recommendations, and I'm just going to go really quick because I'm going to get more specific about this, but the key ones were to allow more development as of right, particularly that multi-family development as well as mixed use. It would still, as we're going to recommend, have site plan and design review, which would be added actually, so that would be really crucial to get this environment we're talking about. The other thing would be to really go through the use table and make sure that you're really allowing all those types of uses that you would like to see in a downtown in terms of retail, commercial, office. And then really work on your special permits. You would really want to only require special permits in terms of attracting developers here for those larger projects. And you would have, we've set some ideas for thresholds that would then trigger that. The other thing would also to be create a separate site plan review for downtown. The reality is that a site plan and design elements for a building in a downtown is very different than an auto-oriented, so there should be a slightly different process. And as Eric mentioned, given that this is an untested market right now, the idea is to make this as, I would say, as clear and concise as possible. So having that simple, almost expedited process would be very helpful. The idea also would be to incorporate specific design guidelines into your zoning itself, and that can control many things, which I'll talk about in just 1 minute. And then you can also have supplemental design guidelines that aren't absolutely, they're non-mandatory, but then help guide what kind of development you're talking about. So the other thing would be more flexible parking, as we've already talked about, average of 1 space per unit, eliminating ground floor commercial requirements with some exceptions. Many communities do not do that in their downtown and allow the current parking, particularly when you can park once and walk to many, to handle that. And then, of course, encourage shared parking whenever. So that's the basic recommendations, which then led specifically into some draft text that we've done. So really what I just want to highlight is specifically what is new in what we're proposing. In general, actually, there's not a lot of significant changes, but there are some crucial large changes that would really help to create that environment that both the market can support, but also would make it more predictable and likely to occur. The first thing we did is we actually looked at the zoning map, and let me make sure this is, so this green area is a little hard to see. This is the current CB. We decided that it best working with groups to extend it slightly to include the business district up here. This is actually the rail yards. Someday if that ever becomes available for development, why not rezone it now? That was actually one of the key things that people mentioned in the public meeting, that they would really like to see residential and mixed use get to the pond. But what we did is, in order to do that more likely, we actually did do a slight extension here. We included some entry corridors and some areas where there'll be some transit investments. So it's not a significant input, but it would slightly increase where you can get that real walkable, amenity-rich area. The main changes here is that the zoning would allow some uses by right that are not currently, specifically that multifamily and also mixed use. Multifamily could be in a reuse project or a brand new ground floor up building. Again, this is about getting the rooftops to support that retail. So the key corridor should have that retail on the ground floor, but you would really want some multifamily only surrounding it. Those extra households will really help support a more varied retail environment. You would still require a site plan and then additional design review, which I'll talk about further, and that special permits would still be required for larger projects, those that would have a significant impact and that you really want to have a little bit more control. That's very common in many communities. You'd add some additional commercial uses. Essentially, you want to allow everything you currently do, but then you want to maybe add things like restaurants. And what we've done is restaurants up to 5,000 square feet would be allowed as of right, and then things like brew pubs and distilleries that are becoming more and more common with tasting rooms to draw people into their downtowns. Fewer special permits. This is one of the key changes here. Specifically, you would only need a special permit. Right now, we're working with it would be structures over 30,000 square feet and or structures over 3 stories. Anything under would be allowed as of right, but it would require a site plan review as well as a design review. And this could be an office, multifamily residential, or mixed-use structures. It would be all of them. And then the idea is, again, any restaurant over 5,000 square feet would require that special permit. It would likely have a greater impact. We talked about having a separate site plan review, and within the draft text we have designed a separate site plan review. It's a little bit more straightforward and requires a few less things, but it would require a minor site plan review for smaller projects, 3,000 to 20,000 square feet, with a 60-day review period, and then major site plan review, which would be required for those projects over 20,000 square feet, and that would allow a 90-day review. We did the idea of having what we call a pre-submission review, which would then first you'd have a proposal meeting, like an informal one with various planning and community development, also the planning board, but then that would be before you would ever actually submit. Then there'd be a pre-submission review with the planning board where there would be the opportunity to understand like what the maybe potential impacts could be, and then you can either waive or actually add maybe some additional review. Depending on the size, then it would go either the major or minor route, and then if everything is met within those criteria, specifically for non-special permit, then that would be permit would be issued. For special permit, you'd still have to do that major site plan review that we're talking about. So that would be a different proposal, a different way of doing it. However, one really key difference is that we've actually, for downtown, incorporated design standards that must be met specifically. And so even though you'd allow it by right, there are design criteria that regulate everything from the building scale, the facade of the building and how it's laid out, everything from window sizes, the amount of transparency on ground floor, the location of parking, for instance, in the back or on the side to maintain that street wall and bring people in a more pedestrian environment. The types of materials, we offer a range of them, things like brick or stone that are typically found currently within the downtown area, but you wouldn't allow things like, for instance, like vinyl siding and things like that. Roof forms, having consistency of roof forms to create that visual appeal. All of these things would be actually incorporated, and they have been in the draft text, so that you'd have to meet that. And then additionally, so you can put certain things within the text that guide, but you in order to actually give a better impression, you'd have supplementary design guidelines, and we've created a separate document that gives a visual representation of what would be desired. These are just a few examples, and I'm sorry that it's really light, but it would include everything from, for instance, this is actually talking about building scale, and with this, there's a diagram here showing that, keeping consistency of the heights of the buildings. They can be slightly different, but as long as, these all have flat roofs, there's no side yards, it creates a constant street. Well, that's what would be within the design standards. This you can't see, but it shows a pitched roof with side yards and opening, which breaks it apart and gives less visually. That would not be what you would be going for. So that's represented. Then there's also pictures that would be showing those better examples to guide developers. So essentially when they're proposing, they know what the community wants, and therefore they design to it, as opposed to creating their own and then coming back and having to change that. There would also be very detailed diagrams like this that was created actually specifically for this, that goes everything from what a cornice would be, the placement of windows, having breaks in the facade to give visual interest, where this was actually a parking garage. That parking garage entrance should be in the back, so that it just guides the development in a much greater way. Dimensional regulations. This is actually quite different. So currently, any residential use in the CB can only go up to 3 stories or 40 feet. We would recommend that a maximum would be 6 stories or 70 feet. Whereas mixed-use structures or multifamily, you could go 6 stories or 70 feet. That 70 feet is actually lower. Right now, you allow 80 feet. However, based on actually the state building requirements, you can't go above 70 feet for a stick frame wood construction. Adding anything has to go steel, and that would add so much cost that you'd have to go significantly higher, and that's not really something that would be actually in demand within this environment. The other thing is lot coverage, dimension requirements. So right now you could go any residential use up to 60 instead of the 35, which is currently, or mixed use up to 80%. So it's just increasing some of that lot coverage, which is really quite appropriate for a downtown. There would be something, density bonuses. Actually, I have another slide, which I'll refer to this after that. But also the idea would be to do tiered density. So the idea is you are surrounded by some residential communities, and you would like that to be a nice transition. So based on the distance from existing residential, you can actually go higher. When you're right within 50 feet to 200, you can go up a maximum of 40 feet, which is 3 stories, or 5 stories as you get further. So you're having a nice gradual incline. When you get a little bit further, you can go up to 60 feet, which is 5 stories, and then when you get to that dark blue area in the center right here, you can hit that maximum. It's important to note that a lot of this was right where the rails are, so it's really these key areas right near the train station, near where we are right now, and in that center. So that's where those greater densities would be targeted for. Flexible parking requirements. This is what Eric was talking about, that really this is one of the key impediments right now. What you really want to do is you want to tie the residential parking specifically to the unit type. So for instance, you would have a number of parking spaces or minimum spaces required for different size units. So for a studio, perhaps it would be half of a parking space for every unit. For a one-bedroom, one parking space required. A two-bedroom, 1.5, and then 2-bedroom or 3 bedrooms would be 2. So that would be the minimum. And the reason why we say minimum parking is that that's what you would be required to do at minimum. But however, developers are going to do their math, and if they feel they need more parking, they'll actually build a little more parking. But you don't want to require too much that they feel they can do without, and that their actually research has shown that they can do. But you want to at least make sure that you have enough. The other thing that we're recommending would be to waive the parking requirement for most commercial uses, specifically retail, on the ground floor. But you would still require parking for any kind of office, those long-term parking that would keep the parking all day. So for one space still for every 250 gross floor area. Restaurants over 5,000 square feet, 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet. These are also uses where people are there for a long time, and if heavy traffic, you want to make sure that there is parking for them, but also others. And then things like brew pubs. So those kind of high trafficked areas in large ones would still require dedicated parking. And then what we're calling now, it's like density, or what we're calling the parcel assembly incentive. This is that you have a lot of small parcels within the downtown area, and it's really hard to actually get that development at those densities you want, specifically because of parking, actually. So what you want to do is you want to kind of add an incentive to assembling those parcels so you can get the type of the development that is feasible within the downtown and the CB district. So what we recommend is that parcels under 20,000 square feet, we've done a lot of analysis to kind of come to this level. You would have more of like a base allowable density, and that's that 3-story, 40 feet with a maximum lot coverage of 60%. That's what you can do. So you still have value with the smaller parcels. But in order to maximize the value, the idea would be for those parcels over 20,000 feet, you give essentially a density bonus. You can go higher, up to 6 stories and 70 feet, and then you can get to that maximum lot coverage of 80%. So really, that's how you can then incentivize that higher density development, particularly in those central areas. So those are the key changes that we're recommending within the zoning. And going forward, Eric's just going to talk about our next steps.
And as you can see on the slide, we're continuing to work with the town and with the standing committee on planning and zoning for town meeting. We're meeting with them about every 2 weeks now. To go through this more detailed discussion on the zoning that Matt has been talking about. We're doing that through February and March. We're continuing to work closely with the town, the boards on the zoning, in preparation for hopefully something to go to town meeting either in the spring or whenever the town is appropriate for it to go forward. So that's that's all we have for you tonight. And if there's any questions or anything.
Will you plan on speaking tonight? Okay. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Matt. Are you going to sum it up, or?
Well, I don't know whether Selectman Lee would like to make a comment, being so involved, and certainly Chairman Meerting Deputy.
And maybe part of your discussion, how are we going to coordinate these zoning recommendations with the recodification that we're already working on, and what's the timing for all these zoning?
So let me just say a couple of comments first, and I think I'll leave the details of the zoning to the town manager, to the standing committee on zoning, to the planning board. I think there's a lot of details there that are really in the right hands. It needs to go to town meeting, and staff needs to drive it. I thank you very much. I mean, I've been through these meetings for several years now, and I really thank everyone for pulling this all together and all the hard work from MAPC and the developers and the people in the town who are coming. I just wanted to give the board a little context, just to remind everyone that, it's really important for boards to keep continuity because we change over time. And back in 2005 is when this plan really started, and it was with John Stasek. And when I came on the board in 2008, I was given the opportunity to work on the downtown. And the 2009 plan that has been talked about is actually this board's plan. This is something that we, although we've changed over time, we basically worked with the Cecil and Beta group and supported, and it wasn't just a transportation plan. It was also, if you remember, that big picture economic and housing development plan with the different colors, and how do we really trying to answer the question is how do we as a board try to really help downtown become a vibrant, living and working place and fun place for the community. And we also did not want it to be a study. We didn't want it to be another one of those 35, 100-year plans that just sit. And we really wanted action, and I think that we've done that with the streetscape. which is going on now with working with our state senator and legislators and getting, and Mr. Markey, and getting the $9 million we need to really make something happen and something change. So this, what we see tonight, I think, is really the culmination of the next step of what we had in that plan as a board, that we wanted, how do we actually make that vision of a lively downtown happen. And so we brought together people who really have done it before. And we've asked them the question is, how do we as a community do it? And I think this is what MAPC really pulled together from all the information that we had. So, I hope that gives the board a little bit of context that this is, although the zoning kind of goes a little bit beyond what our board does and these changes, this is really comes from our vision in that plan. So, I don't know if that really is all.
I'll come back to Charlie's questions, but I don't know whether Stephanie or Christine would like to comment because they've been very, very involved.
Sure. In addition, we also have adopted a new master land use plan. In 2012, we did have a technical review, so we re-adopted that plan. And, of course, downtown was a high priority. That was also in that plan in terms of a living, working document, having that kind of big picture vision. And this allows us to kind of drill down further in terms of what we want to see in the downtown and more of the specifics in terms of design and zoning. And I think with respect to the zoning recommendations, as we go through kind of the working group process with staff, with standing committee, we'll really start to hone in on the devil in the details when it comes to the zoning amendments and how best it would fit in with the first phase of recodification, which is that reorganization of the bylaw and the additional recodification that's currently also planned for the spring annual town meeting.
I think Ms. Carpentier did a very good job at expressing that, as well as Ms. Lee. As I remember from getting on the planning board back in 2008, this has been an ongoing process. So, but actually, I'd like to defer to the administrator because we have discussed how this could become, how this can come to fruition through the zoning.
Amanda, did you want to speak?
I wasn't planning on it, but I think she has a particular vision of how this particular proposal would fit into recodification, into the site plan, and what we're doing per the master plan that we just adopted.
Yeah, so Amanda Loomis, Planning Board Administrator. Planning Board has been working hand in hand with Community Economic Development Department, also MAPC, also Petrini and Associates as our legal counsel. MAPC provided a great document, which we have actually taken and reworked to incorporate into the Framingham Master Plan as we have recodified it. So the definitions will go in the definitions, the table of uses will go into the table of uses, the purposes will go with all the purposes, the site plan review will be integrated within the site plan review, and the parking regulations will be into the parking regulations. They've also developed design guidelines. Those will be incorporated into Planning Board's rules and regulations, which will be referred to within site plan review, which is a requirement for all development to go through. So we have worked it and we've meshed it into recodification so we don't have it kind of going back in the same direction we had prior to recodification. So MAPC and Community Economic Development has been really good at getting everything put together.
Thank you. That's good information. Smith?
Matt, I have a question for you. You specifically mentioned in elaborating on our onerous process. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that and what that process is so we can look at identifying what you had talked about and seeing how we can fix it?
Sure. I mean, well, there's two kind of parts to that. The first was that, any structure that is over 8,000 square feet, no matter the type of use, no matter where it is, requires a special permit. Typically, the way it would be in many communities, usually they are those thresholds. Some communities require...
Stop for 1 second. Sure. Just go back for 1 second because I'm with you.
Okay.
Tell me what typical communities are. Give me some examples so that folks at home and folks on this board...
Sure.
You guys have done this for 8 months. We're getting a very high-level overview from very professional staff.
Sure.
I tried my best to follow along and take some notes. I really did. There was a lot of information. There is. And you guys are professional. There's a lot of information, so I wrote down a lot of questions I had and a couple that I just wanted to... So if you could elaborate for us on that 8,000 square feet one that you talked about, what other communities do compared to Framingham so we can see some potential other changes?
It depends on the community you're talking about. Some communities use a square footage requirement. Some people use an FAR, which is a floor area ratio, which is a little hard to explain right now. So, for instance, Waltham allows certain developments up to a specific FAR, and I believe it's like a 0.25 or 0.5. I can't remember exactly, but it's depending on the size of the parcel. That's what then triggers a special permit. So that's one of those, but it's clear, and it's actually it allows for a certain amount of development as of right, and then again it would trigger it. Others, like I know we just did a recent rezoning in Marlborough, which then also then actually upped it. It's a higher, I can't remember the exact square footage, but another square footage higher than like what 8,000 would then trigger it. Other communities allow just by right, or some communities allow it by special permit. Special permits for anything typically are in the most competitive markets where they really can control it, and it's really more about when you were trying to actually incent development is to really make it as easy as possible. So that's the first part. The one that's really, I would say, more specific to is the site plan review, particularly development impact statement. I've never come across one that requires as many impacts to be analyzed. So I think one of the recommendations was to lessen that in terms of not necessarily requiring all. I think it's 5 or 6, but maybe looking at traffic impacts on certain ones or parking impacts, that would be okay. But fiscal, that was one that was also that would make understand. So the idea is to essentially make it more an easier process, but a very clear one. But in order to do that, that's why we also did add things like having the design standards incorporated directly into it, because you don't want to lose all control. But what you can do is you can actually, at the beginning, rather than having kind of an unclear special permit where you're kind of constantly changing things around or trying to get a specific type of development, by bringing that at the beginning, and as if you meet it, then you're already actually kind of informing development community what you're actually looking for, and then they design to it. So it actually streamlines that overall process in general.
Okay. Another one for you, Matt.
Sure.
When you guys look at demand for quality rental stock, and you looked at just that one area of town, which is Pearl Street and so forth, and you talked about 4 or 5 floors, potential 2 residential parking spots on each. Would that encompass a parking garage right there?
I think so within the development feasibility, no, that did not incorporate a parking garage, what Eric was showing. I believe that there was a secondary where some of them would show if there was a deck. Not on that one, but on another one, there was where they did both the surface parking and then also if there was like a decked parking. So if you actually, deck would be like if you like one level with like, so that you'd have like basically a cement. It's more like, it's not really necessarily a garage, but it's like a 2-level parking structure. That would be the best way to put it. Or it's the residential would go over underground parking.
And the example, because I like the example you gave, where you showed building 1, building 4, and then a little renovation to building 3 as well, and then some proposed parking. That's kind of, I'll say behind the 2 buildings because they're specifically behind them. It looks like that would be next to the commuter rail. Might work out because they could sit in the house for an extra hour before the train comes, so that might be great for them. But the parking in the behind as opposed to on the street, is that one of the things you take away from is street parking?
The idea of the parking behind the structures is actually more of the best practice to maintain that street wall, so that you have, your sidewalks are coming right up to the building. You're putting people like right on the street, kind of the eyes on the street mentality, which is also partially like a safety issue. But it's also getting further into that, the idea of having the surface parking back there. If you did do if the market proves itself and can support structured parking, then you can get even increased density. So it's just another thing. But in terms of I was a little unclear about the question about the street parking. You still have street parking where it's allowed. The idea is that would be the dedicated spaces for those residential units, specifically, not for necessarily public, unless there could be a shared parking strategy developed.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I'd just like to elaborate on one aspect about the site plan review in this context, is that in a very traditional kind of suburban development review, that you do site plan around a particular parcel that's kind of a greenfield development. I'm going to take an acre or 2 acres. I'm going to build an office building. It's going to have a parking lot. I want to make sure the cars can get out. I want to make sure cars can get in. I want to make sure that there's kind of pedestrian walkways from the car to the building and street lights. That when you begin looking at development in a built-up neighborhood or downtown area with a lot of massing and infrastructure that's already in place, it's not so much a review of the site, but how you create the building massing that supports the place, so it's more of a neighborhood. So that's why you see a design standard that would say buildings would be out by the sidewalk, because that building massing is really what makes you comfortable about walking down a street as opposed to having the building pushed back and parking in front.
Where's the lighting in that case?
The lighting, I would imagine, would be regular street lighting. You know,
the parking would be behind the street.
The parking would be behind the building with its own.
And that would be the one area that just contact. I mean, again, it's not my expertise, so that's why I asked with street parking, street lighting, buildings, and then parking's behind. Just trying to figure. I'm sure you'd have separate parking lights and so forth as well, but so you have lights out front, parking, lights out back.
Bail me out, but
as
the
part of the site plan review process,
yeah.
too, when you look at the site and you look at the parking lot, chances are they're also going to have lighting for their own parking lot, too. So that's all part of the site plan review process. In addition, with the recodification, we identified parts of the bylaw that need to be improved, made more consistent with state law, or identified as issues that need to be, or concerns that need to be resolved. And site plan review was one of those sections. And so we're also coming forward with revisions to that section of the bylaw as well.
I like the idea. I mean, the more lighting, the better, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think it's lit well enough. So the idea that you have it on the streets, then behind it is, I know, Lou.
We have our lighting expert on the board.
That's what I'm saying. Is I like that idea because you have it out front, and then you have the ability to behind as well. So, you know, the more lighting to me downtown, the better off it is.
Yeah.
I think, to me, we don't have enough lighting, and I've said that for 9-10 years. I think we need more of it. So I really like that idea. That's trying to get to that point and try to understand it as well. This is a lot of information in 25 minutes to hear from and to take in. So, sorry, just a lot of questions. So I'm trying to make sure.
This is what we deal with all the time. So
But again, conceptually, I love the idea. I thought Laurie was dead on the vision aspect, and more importantly, I think it's the collaboration that you've really seen from this board and all the other boards, along with the administration, including with Amanda and Bob, and having Laurie join in town meeting and so forth. I think that collaboration keeps the town together, as opposed to hand grenades that split towns apart, which I've seen in the past. And I think this has been a really good working group. Again, there's no way I understand everything in this, and that's why I had to ask some questions. I'll probably have some more, but I think from a collaboration standpoint, this is a community together and doesn't divide it. So great job to everybody that's been involved.
Yeah, this is just a really exciting time in Framingham. I think we have a golden opportunity now to really transform the town and really make some changes. My family comes from Haverhill originally, and the Washington Street corridor in Haverhill used to be just old and run down and places where you tried to avoid. And right now, my aunt, she bought a condo on the second story of a retail first floor type of setup all along Washington Street in Haverhill, right near a railroad yard. They've got the pubs there now, the restaurants. They're attracting older people who are retired, who want to have their home, but also the young professionals. And it's just, I go there a lot, and it's just a wonderful place. It's geared to pedestrians. There's not a lot of cars out there.
They're very much like Framingham.
And it's a great stretch, and to see something like that come to Framingham would just be really a wonderful opportunity to really revitalize the downtown. And that's just one model. I know Lowell's done a lot. Other communities have done a lot to really revitalize and take advantage of the ability to do this. So
this would be great in the transportation area too. The T's right there.
Exactly.
You pull in at 8 o'clock now. Let's say you take the 6 o'clock out of Boston, which really shows up at 7:30 nowadays, right? And so that's another issue. You get there at 9:30. It's not exactly all bright over there. So that's why when you started this area, it's awesome. For someone that takes the train, I'm like, this is a great area to do that on. Because if you think about it, people start moving down there. If there's more lighting, they're not, it's not so bad coming home at night. It's just better. So I love that. The section that you've talked about is like key. Love it.
Sure.
I really like the vision that's been shown here, and the details. I mean, the devil's in the details, but there is a lot of detail here too already, and it really shows a lot of promise for our downtown. And I echo what Mr. Barrow says regarding it being a very exciting time for Framingham. And I think it's a very exciting time for downtown Framingham, and you guys have really, all of you who have worked for so hard and for so long and stayed through a bad economy, really accomplished a great deal. And I think it bodes well for the future of our downtown.
Thank you for the presentation. It was great. I think Mr. Smith hit it right on the nail right on the head when he pointed out that the key positive from tonight's presentation was the fact that all of the stakeholders in the town were involved in this planning, putting together what we saw tonight. And that bodes very well for getting this approved and getting this moving once and for all, so we can start redeveloping our downtown. But we thank you for all your hard work. Thank the Planning Board. Thank the Standing Committee on Planning and Zoning. Thank our Planning Board Administrator, Representative Walsh, who I'm sure had a role in getting some of that state money in here to pay for the study. This dates back to, I think, when the governor came downtown, and I remember we stood on the top floor of the parking garage, Pearl Street, and he looked around and he just kind of shook his head and he says, "What do you guys want to do?" And it wasn't easy trying to articulate what we wanted to do, and because of that day out here, he was able to come up with some money to help us put this plan together, and it's great. And I'm glad to see that everybody's been working together, and I just hope it continues. So thank you all very much.
So I think what we'd like to accomplish, assuming this is a planning board meeting, right, is for the planning board to vote to initiate the central business district zoning. Is that still the plan?
We've already taken a motion to refer it to the
So what we're looking
Board of
for
Selectmen
is a
to refer it
motion
back
from the
to
Board of
us.
Selectmen to refer it back to the planning board to start the public hearing process.
Excellent.
So that's a little detail. In
All those in favor of that?
Aye. Yeah.
Opposed? Perfect. It's back in your hands.
Well, there being no further business before the board unless...
Really?
Wait, you want to refer the other...
For the other zoning.
So there are a variety of other zoning matters that are in the warrant.
Yes.
Right? So we can either do that when you come to that agenda item on the Selectmen's meeting, or we can do it while the planning board is here. But they range from the recodification project of the zoning bylaw, a proposal from the planning board to revise site plan review, a revised parking regulations section of the bylaw, transfer of development rights bylaw, rezoning of the Framingham Town Center with a zoning map amendment, this central business district zoning, which we just did, and the rezoning of the central business district zoning map amendment, which I assume we just did.
Yes. Yeah, we had done all of them.
Mr. Chair, I'll just ask you what the process is tonight for number 6, because that was going to be my first question anyway.
Well,
I thought there's a place
We're closing the warrant on 6.
Well, not to close the warrant,
not at all.
but to decide, not just to decide which articles the planning, the Board of Selectmen are going to sponsor.
We're going to decide tonight on what we're sponsoring without the sponsors being here to have discussion?
No, we're being asked.
I thought this was almost like a placeholder tonight. No?
No. We're being asked by the contact people to be the principal sponsor of these articles, which I think we're going to go through.
Yeah, but I don't think the intent is for the board to vote tonight.
No.
If you would like someone to come in and require a presentation to get to that point, that we'd like to hear that tonight.
That's right.
So we're going to go through it. We're not voting on it, but we're going to look at it and do what with it.
If we decide that we want to sponsor it, we can take that position tonight.
Without the folks being here? Okay.
I was going to say, with respect to the articles that are in that letter from our office, is just a matter of referring the matter back to us so that we can initiate the public hearing process.
So these are planning board articles that you're submitting in the warrant.
Yep.
So we just need to make a motion to send, so can we do them as a lump sum? Do we have to?
Send them back, all the zoning articles.
Yes, I'll make a motion that we send
all the zoning
all the
articles.
planning board sponsored articles back to the planning board.
That's good.
So I just want to clarify something so there's no confusion. You're not being asked to sponsor the zoning articles.
Right. No.
Chapter 40A requires that the planning board initiate, or somebody initiate it by sending it to the Board of Selectmen, and then requires that the Selectmen vote to refer it to the planning board.
Right, and I just made that motion.
So it's a placeholder.
This allows them to appeals initiated. The zoning board of appeals initiated a zoning amendment. They would submit it to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen would refer it to.
This allows them to go ahead with the public hearing process.
It's different than I think is getting at.
If I may just say, I think it's customary that we really never even look at or would consider challenging if the planning board wanted to put a warrant article on.
I've never, 9 years, it's never come up like this, so that's why I have so many, I've never seen this.
It's a procedural step. That way we can hold the public hearing as part of the zoning amendment process.
First time you, first time me.
All those in favor of that motion to send the zoning articles to the planning board? Aye. Opposed? So that's done. You guys can leave if you want.
Now, there being no further business before the planning board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Planning board adjourned.
All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposition, abstentions, 500. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
All right. Now, we have a whole list of potential warrant articles that the key contact people are asking the Board of Selectmen to sponsor. Jennifer, if I say something wrong, will you please correct me?
You're on the right track.
The first 9, I think, Charlie.
Okay.
Most of those you've heard about.
Yeah,
The street
like the first one is the TIF for Jack's Abbey Brewing.
So do we need a motion to sponsor?
I'm making motions tonight to sponsor certain articles.
Yes. So I make a motion that the Board of Selectmen sponsor Article 1, Jack Abbey's Brewing. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Next one is amendment to, that's a snow property, right? Okay, and we have to revote that because we didn't appropriate the right amount of money. What's the board's wishes on that?
I make a motion that we sponsor Article 2, snow property.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Third one is the street acceptances, to put different articles on the warrant, which we've already discussed.
This was last meeting, I believe. These streets, Lanewood and...
Yeah. Now, but these are, did we vote these as articles last time, or?
No, we voted to have the public hearing.
Right.
And now you just have to vote if you want to sponsor.
To put articles on the warrant.
Right.
So I'll move that we sponsor Articles 3.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And the same thing for Winch Millwood layout alteration?
Motion to sponsor.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And the easements for Concord Street and Hartford Street?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay. Easements for Old Town Path and Spring Street?
Motion to sponsor.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. The motion to sponsor a River Path Drive roadway layout alteration.
So moved.
Pending approval of the Board of Selectmen sponsor. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Now, the next one.
Yes, this is what we haven't discussed.
We have not discussed this yet.
Right.
And I think this is one where we ought to have the principal contact person come in and explain it to us if we want to sponsor it. So I'll take a motion to invite the principal contact person to come in and discuss this motion. So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. All right. Next one is the transit-oriented development bylaw. I don't believe we...
Well, we rephrase that as that's the amendment to the central business district. Yeah, we just did that. So whether or not you want to sponsor that or not is a discussion you might want to have. But that was what was just referred back to the planning board as central business district zoning.
So I do the
but
question.
is this going to be a zoning change or a bylaw change?
This is a zoning bylaw amendment involving the central business district zoning.
So this is something the planning board should sponsor.
Yes.
I guess the question is, do we want to joint sponsor it?
Correct, in light of the...
That's why I wanted to ask him before we send it away tonight, because we have all these things we're voting on, and I'm not comfortable voting on without talking with them. That's why I mentioned it earlier.
So this is really the presentation we just saw, with and they would be doing the zoning changes. So
I guess the question is, does it give it more weight if it's co-sponsored by the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board rather than just the Planning Board? Because they're going to sponsor it. They're going to submit it.
Correct.
Okay.
And they'll be back on March 25th to talk specifically about the recodification, so that if you wanted to renew the discussion about whether you would like to join them in sponsoring it, that would be an opportunity to do that.
Okay, so you want to wait for then?
It is a little bit strange because we really don't even take positions on zoning articles.
Ordinarily,
so
I think that's why I was confused.
It's a little bit confusing. In this particular case, it is all about the zoning changes. So.
All right, the next one is offered to us by the CFO to make a lump sum payment for the Framingham share of the Key Folk Technical School roof replacement rather than do it in annual payments.
Correct. And some of the background to this is the annual certification of their excess and deficiency account was such that we're getting a rebate on excess and deficiency. So as opposed to making time payments, I think she's combining a proposal to take the excess and deficiency that's coming back in a one-time payment and then avoiding the debt service.
Okay. Where's that gone in the past, the deficiencies in the past?
That would reduce our assessment.
This time, what's happened in the past with that?
No, I think what she's saying, Mr. Smith, is that rather than reduce the assessment, apply it towards the debt, and then we make another lump sum payment.
That's the CFO.
This is a CFO. She's going to be responsible.
She'll be sponsored.
And as a matter of fact, the next big group of them are all sponsored by the CFO.
Yeah.
And then there's citizen petitions. So there's really no others listed here for us to sponsor.
So I guess I would just have one question. So I know that Representative Walsh is out here, and I'm wondering, I know we spoke earlier about, do we want to joint sponsor the gas leak?
Yes. Are we ready to actually submit a warrant article, or should that be a resolution?
Yeah.
Oh, then we don't want to.
We don't want to put it on the warrant as a warrant article. It'll be offered at town meeting as a resolution.
Under what article?
Someone's going to have to mention it, unless you want to add it as a warrant item.
Unless you want to add it as an article.
I think if Chris is asking for a resolution, it's not going on the warrant.
You can have an article that's a resolution.
On anything?
That's what I mean. Exactly. So you don't need what I'm saying is you don't need a warrant for it.
You're right.
By how we've done town meeting.
So we'll just park that for now and keep it in mind when we get closer.
Is it cleaner to have a warrant? I mean, I know Chris said no, but I'm thinking.
Well, we don't have the wording for it, and
that's saying there's no paper. Is there?
When do we close this?
March
17th.
13th is the deadline.
We can get paperwork into us up to the 17th of March.
Well, Mr. Bauer is correct. It's the Thursday or the Wednesday or Thursday before the 17th. So if we think that a warrant article is appropriate, we would have to get the warrant article
I would
submitted.
suggest, Mr. Chair, that the representatives speak with Terry Banerjee and find out
what's the best
whether this can come in under any warrant article or whether she recommends it should be a separate article, because we just don't want to get to town meeting and have a rule that we can't debate it under this article because it's not appropriate, or this or that, and then have to call a special. So I think maybe that conversation will take place.
Yeah, and then communicate that to the town manager, and then we'll take it up.
I'm happy to add it.
Okay.
That sounds great.
Good, thank you. And that's it. All the others are spoken for by the CFO or citizens petitions or other town boards.
And we'll weigh in on these before town meeting. We usually
we'll review them again and decide whether or not we want to take a position on the other articles. So looks like there's about a total of 43 potential articles for town meeting.
Yeah. Now, just for further discussion, on the snow parcel, we may ask the Board of Selectmen to post a special town meeting in the first week so that can come up. The town meeting can be closed and town council can begin the steps to execute the real estate closing, because that needs to be done by June 30th. So I just want you to
So we need to decide if we're going to do that, and then we can take it off the warrant for the annual.
Yeah, at the time that we pull this all together and close the warrant and formulate the warrant, we'll probably recommend a special town meeting on the snow parcel. Yeah. Yeah. And then maybe some similar thoughts on some other articles as well.
That may be where we want to put a resolution if we have one for the representative. So and get moving on it.
All right, good.
Okay. Any other questions on the warrant? Next item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes. First one is executive session and open session for February 3rd.
Move approval, but without release.
For the executive.
For the executive.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. And open session.
Move approval.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And now the open session for February 10th.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. And the last item on the agenda is Selectmen reports. Mr. Smith.
Pass.
Mr. Bauer.
Just a quick update on Team Framingham. We have our second Team Framingham meeting tomorrow, but I just want to report that fundraising is going along very well. While the training may not be for some runners because of the weather, the fundraising is going along very well. And as of this afternoon, the team has raised $11,641. Resiliency for Life is the leader. They have 8 runners, and they've raised $4,523. Call to Talk with 4 runners has raised $2,579. Delta ESL Plus with 3 runners, $2,116. The Callahan Senior Center with 2 runners, $1,041. Framingham History Center, $806 with 2 runners. And Voices Against Violence, $576 for 3 runners. At this point, we've added 3 more sponsors since Herb Connolly Acura came in and made their donation of $500 to sponsor Team Framingham. We've received $500 donation from Cumberland Farms, which is based here in Framingham. All-Star Auto Sales on Water Street presented us with a check for $200. And this afternoon we received a $500 check from La Cantina.
Great.
So sponsorships and fundraising are going quite well.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Tully Still?
Just want to mention how informative I found last night's Knobscot meeting. I think people had an opportunity to express what their desires are for the village of Knobscot, and I found it very helpful to hear people talking about both pros and cons of what has been going on and some of the ideas that people had for the potential of the village. I found to be very inspiring and very good, and I hope that we have the same kind of turnout for the Saxonville Neighbors meeting on Thursday night.
Good. Thank you. Ms. Lee?
Yeah, I also want to thank everyone for coming last the meeting. It was a great turnout, and I thank town manager for coming, staying the whole time, actually probably longer than some of us who snuck out towards the end, and you're surrounded by a lot of people, and thank you very much. And I comment that it was quite an effort to get all of those people into the breakout groups. I think when you thought it would be smaller, it would be much easier, and it was a great job. I was able to help facilitate with Marianne, and it was really, I thought, really the highlight. It gave people a chance to speak, and what I took out of it from after talking to people and hearing a lot of calls from people today is that people really want to be heard. Yes. I think we need to give Cecil Group that message that, that people showed up and they really spoke very sincerely, and they do need to be listened to. Yep. So, but it was, and I think that it was great. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.
Got a license to sign here, folks.
You are watching The Government Channel, a service of the Town of Framingham. The Government Channel broadcasts meetings and events held by the Town of Framingham. Governmental proceedings are cablecast live to inform residents and encourage participation in local government. Some of the programming provided keeps residents abreast of road closings, construction updates, recycling efforts, public safety information, and special events in the community. The Government Channel is the best source for direct access to your Framingham government. The Government Channel. Stay connected, stay informed.